Hello, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of The Cult Vault. I'm your speaker, Casey, and for this instalment, I speak with Don, who tells us about his experiences in a branch of Mormonism. There are themes of spiritual and physical abuse in this episode, so please listen with discretion. If you have a story you would like to share, then please email me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com. But for now, here is Don. Hi, Don, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're diving into new territory for me this evening, and that is the topic of Mormonism. So, would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Hello, Casey. Yes, certainly, and thank you for inviting me on this. I'm Don. I've been with a cult that in this, for the sake of this podcast, I will be limiting the depth in which or the accuracy in which I refer to it. We'll call it Zion. It's got a longer name, but that's what we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there for 17 years. I've been out for about 10 years now, and it's taken at least that long to really leave it behind. Something about being a member of an authoritarian organization is that if they allow your worldview to be modified, that it's very hard to let it go, to change it. I think that's the deepest level of understanding that our psyche gives us. So,
and is this movement something that you were born into, or is it something that you found organically?
No, I wasn't born into it. I joined at 18, so
Okay.
I was very influential, or very easily influenced at that time. But more than half the members there were born into it, and they'll have the hardest time leaving because their worldview, they don't know any life before. So they only know what RB, the leader, has told them.
So you joined at 18, and you mentioned that you feel as though you were easily influenced at that age. Is there any particular reason why you think that might have been?
I think, so when you leave the home, usually at 18, usually when you become an adult, you get a glimpse of the world for how it really is. And while you're in that mode, you've got your mind wide open to taking in this new reality that's separate from, the house that you grew up in and the school. So for me, that was when I was the most open to new ideas. Plus, I should mention that when I was like 14 or so, my own father passed away.
Right.
And
Okay.
I didn't really have a father figure when I needed it the most. Subconsciously, I was kind of looking for that. So
I think that must be completely natural. That's such a difficult age to navigate in a person's life anyway, and then to suffer that level of loss, must be extremely overwhelming and confusing, on top of everything else that you're kind of going through physically and psychologically at that age anyway.
Yes. Yes, definitely. When that happened that I started questioning my reality, that I started looking outside for like answers, like, somebody close dies when you're young, you start taking seriously the question of, well, where did they go? And most people will answer, well, they went to heaven. Well, what's heaven? Well, that's where God is. Okay, who's God? I had those questions, and I was so embroiled with that, that I even, started like really praying more than ever that God would lead me. And so I was extra sensitive to feelings that might be God telling me to go this way or that.
Right.
Um,
And is your faith something that had been a part of your life before you were introduced to this group, or is it something that was new to you when you found them?
uh, it, I was spiritual, but I wasn't religious. We'll put it
Okay.
that way. I didn't go to church very often. I wasn't born a Mormon, not in the traditional sense. One thing you should know about Utah is even though the majority of them are Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there are a lot of splinter groups, and those have hung on to, they probably splintered off of the main church for one reason or another, that they disagreed with some piece of doctrine that the church added, and they believed that certain fundamental principles were how God really meant it to be. And that was the case of my own dad. He was part of a splinter of the LDS movement. And so we didn't go to like our LDS, the church of my schoolmates. And so I was kind of left to make up my own mind about
Okay.
how to interpret the Book of Mormon, which is the LDS church scripture.
Okay. Okay. And you mentioned briefly there about schools. So the majority of your peers, when you were going through the educational system, were
Mhm.
part of that mainstream
Mhm.
Utah
Mhm.
Mormonism,
Mhm.
bigger branch
Right.
of the church.
Mhm.
Okay. And so was it uncommon for somebody to be part of one of these splinter groups such as yourself?
It was fairly uncommon. I would say maybe 5% of the population fell into this. I mean, of the population uh, that had any claim to being part of Joseph Smith's teachings, any
Right.
claim to knowing that, would have been a part of some splinter group or some outside ideas. Um, and there are some sections, most notoriously like the Fundamental Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the FLDS, that was run by Warren Jeffs. That was a particularly large splinter of LDS movement. But there were others. There were definitely others, and some of them latched on to certain keys that Joseph Smith revealed, and that, like for instance, Joseph taught that Adam, the first human, was also God the Father of Jesus Christ. Um, and the LDS Church kind of, even though it's in the history documents, they left it behind, and so a bunch of people were like, well, if Joseph taught it, then it's true, or some of them, because Joseph taught that God felt that you needed to have more than one wife. A man should have more than one wife to get into the celestial kingdom, which is the highest kingdom in their regard. And when the Mormon pioneers trekked out to Utah, they had issues with the federal government that said you can't live that law and still be part of the United States. So they had to make changes, and then another group of people would splinter off and say, yeah, but we believe that that's something that God said, so we have to do that. So that's how those kind of things happened.
Right, right, okay. And it's kind of in keeping with most mainstream religions, I think, how
Mm-hmm.
people interpret certain bits of scripture will
Mm-hmm.
change kind of, the core message of a group. And if some people don't agree, they'll go off
Right.
and make their own sect of
Exactly.
Christianity. And then before you know it,
Uh,
you've got more new age religions than you can shake a
right.
stick at. So
Uh,
so this is interesting that this is another example of that, given that
it's,
Mormonism kind of is already a branch of Christianity, and then
Exactly. Yeah.
underneath Mormonism there's all this other stuff going on. So
Yeah.
you're 18 years old, you're open to um, having your faith-based questions answered by people that come across and say they have the answers to these questions that you've had for the last few years. So how is it that you come into contact with this group initially?
Right. So I mentioned that when my dad passed away, that I began actively searching for answers. Because my dad was a member of a fundamentalist Mormon sect, he
Okay.
was a polygamist, and I didn't know that until after he died. I mean, you imagine going to your parents' funeral and finding 10 times as many people there
Oh my goodness, of
that
course.
claim to be your sibling than you knew existed, and that was mind blowing for me.
Oh
That
my
really
goodness. That must be.
created a lot of questions.
Whoa. So hang on. So did your father live with you in your home?
Only one day out of the week. He came over on
No.
Sundays. Yeah, yeah. It was
So he's living in different houses
uh,
throughout the week.
right. Yes, yes, he was.
Oh
And it
my
didn't. And
goodness.
so he was a lawyer. He was a defense attorney, and we assumed that his job just like ate up all of his spare time. But yeah, he spent at least one day with the different wives. He had three wives at a time at the end time, and 58 children. 58
58.
for real. And my mom had 15 of them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot to keep track of. I don't know half of them.
How many grandchildren does he have? Do you know?
No idea.
Hundreds. He must have hundreds.
Hundreds, yes, hundreds for sure.
Oh my goodness. So you thought that you were one of 15, which is already an
Right? It's
astronomical
already huge.
number.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And then it turns out you're one of 58.
Right.
That is what a bombshell. What a bombshell
Right.
to get at your father's funeral. I was
Mhm.
gonna say, if he spends the majority of his time in your house and that's his marital home, so to speak,
Right.
you would find it kind of like weird that all these
Mhm.
people had shown up and assumed to have a claim on your father as their father. But actually,
Right.
if he is splitting his time evenly between all of the households,
Mhm.
they're oh my goodness, that must have been so strange for all four families to just have
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. The older siblings understood the situation. It's not like it was a secret that was kept from the kids.
Oh my
I was
gosh.
just in my own world. I just wasn't paying attention. So yeah, it didn't even cross my mind until he left, until I saw them at his funeral.
And you're already struggling with the bereavement and loss of your
Right.
father, and
Mhm.
you're 14 years old, and you've walked
Mhm.
into this situation of a horrible, pure grief
Mhm.
to be faced with this. I mean, what goes through your mind at that time when things start to unfold?
Um, well, I just I become well. Partly, I fell into a kind of a teenage depression where I started questioning my morals, whether I'd been living, worthy of certain things, um, and uh, and also, just my reality in general, whether God was watching and He expected certain things for us to do. Um, to be worthy of his kingdom and stuff um and that got me kind of brooding, kind of um restless. That was the main thing. I was just very, very restless, and because I had siblings um it, that were already all grown up, I was the fifth from the last of all of them.
Oh, okay.
So I had adult siblings in different states, and I wanted to get to know them. And mostly I was just restless, and I couldn't stay still. So at like 15 or 16, I moved out of the house, and I started living with one brother in Florida, another brother in California, um, another brother in another part of Florida, and another one in Utah. And I just couldn't stay still. I couldn't stay at home. I didn't feel like I knew even what reality was anymore.
No,
Um,
I can't even imagine. Like, I mean, it's one side of the coin is that you get to explore so many
mhm,
parts of America at such a young
right.
age, and go
Mhm,
and feel somewhat comfortable in these environments, and traveling. But at the
yeah.
same time, you want to go out and meet all of your siblings, but there's like 43 of them or something that
Yeah.
you want to meet and get to know. And
Mhm,
how are you supposed to have all the time to do that, and
right.
to travel through every person and meet them,
You
and
can't.
not just get to know them sort of what their
Mhm.
name and age is, but to get them to know them on a personal level? Is that even possible? I'm not sure.
I don't, well, it depends on how determined you are, and I wasn't that determined.
Right.
So I've met maybe half of them.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
but yeah. So af- after a little bit of that, I returned home to find that my mom had remarried, and the man she remarried was somebody who was tangled up in the fundamentalist Mormon movement. He didn't have
Right,
more than one wife, but he knew people in different splinter groups,
right.
and because I it worried my mom that I was kind of restless, that I
Mm-hmm.
wandered the streets at night, sometimes staying up for several nights in a row. Um, I wasn't doing anything bad. I wasn't doing drugs or anything, but I couldn't sit still. Um, anyway, she had me stay with another polygamous family in southern Utah, and they had built uh, a refuge against hard times, which they called Rockland Ranch. It was in Hatch Rock in southern Utah, next to the Arches National Monument. So if you hear the word Utah, you probably think Red Rock Country,
Mm-hmm.
and arches and just really beautiful rock formations. Well, they had blasted with dynamite homes into one of these formations, and this man, and he had three wives, had blasted several homes, and my stepfather referred me to them to work with them, to spend some time with them, learn um, some work ethic and some life skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to help them blast homes in rocks, work with dynamite, like a regular teenager.
Every young
Right.
boy's like
Yeah.
destructive dream, I guess.
Kind of was. And it was in the middle of the wilderness. I mean, just really wild weather and heavy winds sometimes, and then other times just the most peaceful, serene thing you can imagine. So that gave me a lot of time to think. But while I was there, I met there were several people that would pass through, um, some to just see the spectacle of this family
Blowing
living
things up. Yeah,
in the rock. Yeah.
absolutely.
And some were just like other splinter groups and other members of different fundamentalist with fundamentalist ideologies would come and visit. So there was one guy in particular, um, that I became kind of friends with. I got to know him fairly well, and this man, later, after I had the left Rockland, um, he came to my house to talk to my stepdad. And when he saw me, he said, I'm about to head down to meet our mutual friends down in Rockland. You want to come with me? And I'm like, well, it's the middle of summer. Why not? Also, like I was 18, so I could do whatever I wanted. So I went with him. And on the way down, he told me about something happening in Missouri, and that he thought it was like the fulfillment of prophecy. And also they were working on a lot of alternative energy sources and things like that to help the earth. And I thought, well, I'd really like to see that. So I asked if I could go with him, and so we did. We went after we went to the Moab, to Rockland Ranch. We started heading east toward Missouri, which is about 1,500 miles east of Utah. And you should know that Missouri was one of the, in LDS church history, was a very significant place. There were prophecies of a place where Christ would gather his elect, the very, most faithful people in heaven, that he would gather them for the millennium, for his millennial reign for 1,000 years, that people kind of loosely assumed would be the year 2000 and up. This place that he was taking me to believed that they were the place where Christ would come.
Okay.
To do that.
So there's lots of appealing things happening, I think, all together here. You're 18 and you're kind of like, well, I can just go off and do what I want. So,
right.
Maybe I will go revisit those familiar people down in Rockland. But at the same time, you're being told that there's a chance that this place in Missouri has, can fulfill a prophecy, but also they're doing like conservation and stuff down there, and who doesn't want to be part of making the planet a better place to live? So they've got like a few little things going on here that you're like, well, if the prophecy fulfillment doesn't entice you, let me tell you about these energy saving programs we're running, because that might just do the trick. So there's a couple of little things happening.
Right. I had with my best friend, we had built our own. We designed systems that would make use of alternative fuels. We were already caught up in that. We even built our own alcohol still. Nice. It didn't work, but we built one. And we were going to use it to make ethanol, to make fuel out of. But we could have gotten in trouble with that too. But I don't know. It didn't work, so it didn't matter. So the idea of renewable fuels, and in this case, hydrogen energy, was very appealing.
So you go off to Missouri, and what happens when you arrive there? I mean, is there like a commune set up? Is it just, or do people kind of gather from all over to the congregation? What does it look like?
Well, so when we approached the property, there was a wrought iron gate in the front, just a black gate in front of this field. And when we approached, there was the phone right outside the gate, and we called in, and they opened the gate for us, and we started to drive down this dirt road. About a quarter of a mile, and then suddenly the dirt road dipped really sharply down into an underground cavern.
Whoa, okay.
And then another quarter of a mile driving underground in this garageway to a parking lot. And then from there, just this extremely interesting underground facility.
Wow.
There were no two walls that were like at a right angle like you would expect with regular architecture, because they were building around pillars that were holding up the ceiling.
Right.
And they weren't placed at regular intervals. So when they would make their walls, they would stand them up next to the pillars, and they would go at funny angles, sometimes like hexagons and trapezoids and different things. And so it was really
Whoa,
interesting. And
okay.
then sometimes they just painted the pillar, just like painted it all white. And so you'd see a raw pillar just sitting there. And then while you're walking down the corridor,
Whoa,
and
that sounds wild.
mhm, it was really, really wild. And then when you would go outside of the facility, the finished area, it was just like an open cavern, just going off into as far as you can see into blackness, with pillars that were like 30 feet in diameter placed randomly throughout. And that it turned out there were hundreds of acres of open underground space
Whoa,
that this group owned.
did you not ever feel like a little bit claustrophobic or kind of
No,
worried about
it was really
being
appealing to
crushed?
me.
Was it? Oh my
Yeah,
goodness. It
I
sounds
always love the
awesome.
idea of like cave exploring and things. So, but I mean, these were man-made caves, but still, you could wander for hours in the
So
blackness with a flashlight.
on the top, are
Mhm.
there any buildings or any kind of indication that underneath you is this whole like network of life?
Nope, not at all.
Oh
And
my goodness.
there was a forest, an alfalfa field, and a lake. Yeah, a lake on the roof.
So like four different ecosystems like
Mhm.
cohabiting
Right.
within this radius.
Yeah, and it was
Wow, that's
part of it
so
was just
clever.
wilderness. Yeah. So that was by itself quite appealing.
Yeah.
And I stayed with them for the week, and while I was there, they put me to work. Um, it turned out that was the week that they were going to pour cement on the driveway, the quarter-mile driveway going down
Right.
into the
Yep.
underground.
Yep.
And so I helped them pour the cement, to form it, to run a board along it. They call it screeding, which leveled it, and do some of the finish work when that was done. And that was, up to that point, the hardest I'd ever worked in my
Wow.
life.
Okay.
But there's a funny thing when you're working that hard. There's a kind of an emotional high that you get from it, kind of a dopamine effect. And I felt that, and I thought that was, the spirit saying, you need to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked them if I could stay. And I didn't know at the time that they were, how deep the rabbit hole went, but I pretty much committed myself to find out.
And at that time, in those early stages of kind of partaking in this manual labor, I suppose there's also that reward of seeing your commitment to the cause actually physically in the
Right.
driveway, and being part
Yeah.
of building this like utopian
Mhm.
environment. And so you've got that sunk cost fallacy already kind
Right.
of
Yeah. It was
playing.
already
Yeah.
being formed.
But and it's the same with I think I've mentioned this previously on the show. When the first people went over to Jonestown in Guyana, and they talked about
Mhm.
building the buildings and the roads and putting the infrastructures
Mhm.
in for this community,
Mhm.
they said it was like they were building their own paradise, and they
Right.
didn't mind working 18-hour days because they could see the fruits of their labor in
Mhm.
front of them, and it was like being part of like this life-changing amazing community.
Yes.
So is
Mhm.
that kind of like the same sort of
Yeah,
thing that you were
exactly. Yes.
experiencing in that first week?
Mhm.
Okay,
Right.
interesting.
Um, and during my time there, I did a lot of building. I did a lot of cement work. I did a lot of framing, drywall, electrical work, plumbing, and building things, building dorms. This underground is what they would call the campus for the we'll just call it IAS, which is a school that is supposed to be one of the foremost research organizations in the field of hydrogen energy, which was a big thing for them. That was what the leader specialized in, and he was world renowned as a hydrogen expert.
Wow.
They called him Mr. Hydrogen. And he loved it. He loved the attention. But they had a hydrogen fuel cell car that the leader, we'll call him RB, or father. In religious sense, we'll call him father because that's what we called him. He liked to be called father. But we also, around other people, we sometimes just called him RB, which were his initials. And so he had built a hydrogen homestead, like a house powered by hydrogen, like converted a propane stove, not propane, but natural gas stove to run on hydrogen, and a car that, a car that ran just on like a pressurized hydrogen tank that he converted to the engine to burn hydrogen and propel the car forward. And then later to create an electrical system that it's called a hydrogen fuel cell. So the technology allows you to take hydrogen and oxygen, just oxygen from the air, and pipe it through a block of membranes. And while the hydrogen and oxygen were going through, I should say the hydrogen was going through, the electron would go through a wire and do some work, run a motor, and then come back on the other side and join the oxygen and create water vapor. So it was really clean, really efficient. He was not, just some, average schmuck with a huge ego. He was quite smart. He was a scientist in this field, and he let, I don't know, I think somewhere along the way in his zeal to change the world, he picked up some interesting ideas about himself, and we can go into that if you want.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like something I think we should go into a little bit more. And I know that you're keeping some of the details of the movement quite vague, which I think is understandable and can be appreciated by some of the listeners who are tuning in, who may have come from their own high control movements and movements of coercion, which is completely respectable. So we're gonna, if anybody has been part of a similar, although I think that you would have definitely, I think listening to it, if you'd been part of this movement because of the dynamic that you've described, I think you would know if it was the same one.
Right, exactly.
So if anybody has been a part of this particular group and would like to get in touch with Don to talk about more in-depth things, then just let me know and we can discuss sharing emails and things like that. But it's interesting that you've gone to this place that is for people that want to practice their religion, but is incorporating such a high level of science at the same time. It's not often that you see those two things working so closely to one another. So is that another thing that you think may have enticed you to kind of want to stay there a bit longer?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. As I mentioned, I was already a fan of sustainable energy.
Mm-mm.
Um, and I wanted to be part of that. It lended credibility to the movement that they were already working on earth-changing initiatives. So that was like, yeah, definitely God's behind this. They're changing the world.
Yeah,
Going to.
progressive, not just
Mhm,
kind of
mhm,
using the same old scripture and doctrine
mhm.
that's kind of years old
Right.
and is being used by so many other branches and sects, and that the
Mhm,
progressiveness is coming through the science
mhm.
and the renewable energy and the cavernous living quarters.
Right.
So all right, so what, where does the faith stuff come into this?
Right. So, and this was the beginning of the rabbit hole. So along with the hard work, they had regular gatherings about 3 times a week that were called School of the Prophets. Now, in the beginning times with Joseph Smith, when he was starting the LDS movement, they had a School of the Prophets, and that was where the first elders would teach, would receive by the Holy Ghost the doctrines of heaven, and would teach them to other members, particularly other elders. And in the beginning of Zion, that was what they felt was one of the things that needed to happen for Zion to be restored. Um, and so we had these meetings, and these meetings, they RB himself taught just like 2 hours at a time, just laid out the doctrines of the movement, right? The doctrines of the church, and they were inspiring. They were very inspiring, and they were consistent with scriptures, and they were consistent with themselves, with each other, and they were they pointed at like a system in heaven where heaven was in turmoil, and the only thing that could save it was us as in Zion. And that was just
Right.
part of God's plan that culminated across all of creation before now up to that group.
And does that 144,000 number come into this at any point? Because I know that that's
Yeah.
something that's used quite regularly in
Mhm.
many different branches
Mhm.
of LDS and FLDS
Right.
teachings.
Right. That the way that forms is that they prophesied that Adam would stand in this place called Adam on Diamond, which they said means God with man,
Right.
and he would address a group of 144,000 heads of families of elders,
Right.
and that would happen according to this group at the end of the millennium, at the end of the 1,000 years that started around about the year 2000. Um, but in their doctrine, it started with that little group.
So, because this is the only reason I asked is because I
Mhm.
did quite a large amount of coverage on this mother called Laurie Vallow, and I don't know if you've heard about the story with her,
Mhm.
but she was a practicing LDS member of one branch. I'm not sure specifically which one, um, but there's loads of deaths surrounding her family, including like multiple ex-husbands, and then her children disappeared, and she couldn't tell authorities where they were, and then eventually they found the tragically found the bodies of the
Oh.
children. But
Hmm.
she would prophesize all the time about she was the person that was going to round up the 144,000. That was the job that was given to her as a messenger of God, So it sounds quite similar to what RB is teaching your group about, you being the ones that are gonna be saved the end times, when it happens, whenever it happens,
Right.
along with or as part of the
Mhm.
144,000. So is that
Mhm.
something that's common across
Mhm.
most branches of LDS teachings,
I don't know. I
where
think
every
probably,
branch thinks that they are the,
yeah,
the
the
ones?
ones who hold the keys
Yeah, yeah.
of the bringing to pass of God's kingdom on the earth. Um, that yeah, the keys, that's a big deal. Anything Joseph ever taught, any of the prophecies he had are I think every group that claims to be a follower of Joseph Smith would incorporate those things. But I
Mm-hmm.
haven't met a lot of people in these groups, a couple of them, but not enough to make a definitive statement like that. But I imagine.
Okay, okay. And if you're getting together to have these meetings and these talks with Father, how many of you are there living in this underground
Mm.
network roughly? Are there like children? Is it,
Yeah.
and is it polygamist as well? So are there like
Mm.
men with multiple wives?
Sort of. So there were about, at the beginning, maybe between 70 and 100 when I first
Okay,
joined. Um, and there, at that time, there were two people who had more than one wife, two men,
okay,
and RB was one of them.
right. Mm-hmm.
When I left, RB was the only one, and he
Okay.
had a dozen
Wow. Oh my
wives.
goodness.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And is there
So,
any particular reason why he was the only one to pick up that practice?
that kind of delves into the doctrine. Um,
Okay.
so, do is this a good time to go into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So, okay, so their worldview revolved around the idea that there is a war going on in heaven and on earth, the earth just being like the physical manifestation of heaven, really. That all of creation, every person that God ever created, the God the Father is the father of all of creation, everybody on the earth and everybody who ever lived. That in the beginning of days, like before, way before this earth, many worlds before this earth, God the Father had two sons. The first was Jehovah, which is Jesus Christ, and the second one was Lucifer, who was the star of the morning. Now that's all just part of LDS doctrine too. And over the millennia, they would have spirit children, and their spirit children would only be like spirits in heaven, and they would have to prove themselves before they could be exalted, receiving like a physical body, being sent down into a world, like being born,
Right.
um, and then proving themselves under a veil of like, like we don't remember what happened before and we don't know what will happen after. That's the veil. So
Right.
they were sent down to an earth, to a planet, where they proved themselves, and then were either exalted or made to go through another birth experience until eventually they could become exalted and be active citizens in heaven. So that would have continued for like billions of years, with billions of generations of father to son, with daughters, and that were wives um, of men, and that the power of the authority of God, which was called the priesthood, um, was the power to create, to have dominion over over your children, really. It was kind
Right.
of an invisible tether between the very highest to all the way down as a family tree to the very lowest, to the very youngest member of heaven. And so there were billions of people, or spirits, and there and there were times, there were actually more and more times where the children, where the spirits would fail to be exalted even after like going through hundreds of worlds. They just couldn't do it, and they had to be destroyed. They were called perdition, and their spirits were like disorganized, and basically died in heaven. So the big deal was that that Lucifer and Jehovah so were had a debate, I guess, because Lucifer's kids were dying at a higher proportion than Jehovah's, and Lucifer was trying to save them. And so what he did was he like addressed all of the the council of heaven, of the Elohim, they call them, which is like multiple gods, and said, we should change how we decide whether they're exalted. We should, instead of letting them make, letting them make a choice, and then if they choose wrong, just kind of, go ahead with that, and let that happen. We should punish them for making wrong choices, like slap their hand or do something to teach them
Right. Yeah.
at that moment. And they would be, they couldn't fail because we made them succeed.
Okay.
And Christ was like, okay, so if we do that, then who gets the glory? If they can't earn their own exaltation, then they don't get, they don't get the they don't get credit for doing it, right? And so Lucifer's like, well, I guess I get it. I get the glory. And then and Christ was like, no, we can't do that. We need to continue with the current plan. And Lucifer was like, got really angry, and he was cast out of heaven. He like had his body removed, and his spirit was cast down into what they call outer darkness. And because the priesthood was cut off from him, everyone underneath him also lost the priesthood. All of his kids, which was 1/3 of all of heaven, lost the priesthood. And so they also lost their bodies and were cast into outer darkness as well. And so the result was that something needed to be done so that this kind of failure never happened in heaven again. And so they needed to rebuild the order from the ground up, starting with the most devoted and working down from there. So that's what this world is for, according to that. And that after 7 dispensations, 7,000 years, because of course this earth is only 6,000 years old, that people would be born 6 times, and then on the 7th time, they could be exalted if they were worthy, if they were devoted, and they would be exalted and sealed into the order in ranking of how devoted they were. So the most devoted would be at the very foundation,
Right.
and it'd work up from there. So that's what we were doing. We were building a place. We were the foundation of heaven, this Zion, and we were proving our devotion and also creating a situation where heaven would be strong, would have really firm foundations and wouldn't fail again. So we were all considered. So good. Getting back to your point about wives. Okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So according to this doctrine, like man was created by splitting God's intelligence, like the spirit of a father, by splitting his intelligence, and with the aid of the mother, that spirit would be like born, right, as a unique individual having its own ability to choose things and its own personality. And then that son would need to have his intelligence split into, to kind of like cells, mitosis.
Right. Okay. Yep.
Right. He'd have his intelligence split, and then that would be his companion, his helpmate. And they would, form other children by splitting intelligence and sending them to worlds and coming back and being exalted, and then having their own children. So that was how things were supposed to have worked. But as an added benefit, I guess, a son could split his intelligence and have a daughter too. And instead of her being split to have a companion that's a son, that celestial daughter would be another wife of the father who had her, who birthed her.
Right.
So that is how God would have multiple wives, by splitting his intelligence. And he would either have sons, and then they would go off and have their own progeny, or he'd have daughters, and she would be like part of his household.
Right. But he's not marrying his own children. He's just marrying other women.
Well, so celestial daughter and celestial companion were considered the same thing,
right,
in this doctrine. And so when in practical terms, in Zion, father would have like his own household, his own companions that came down for the purpose of this earth into bodies of like women who were around, all over the place. And then they would feel him, and they would come, the spirit would call them to Zion, and he would be like, and then he would do, I don't know, I think he would court them in his own way, but he would have revealed to him that they were his companion, his celestial daughter. And then they would have revealed to them that, yes, they were his as well. And because he was like the oldest one. Oh, and incidentally, RB, and he wouldn't say this, because no man knoweth when Christ should come and so forth, that whole prophecy, he didn't tell anyone this, but he believed he was Jesus Christ.
Right.
And would treat people like he was Jesus Christ. He would forgive sins. He would seal them into like eternal relationships and stuff like that. And only he could do that.
I was going to ask that question. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So because he was like the oldest one, he had more daughters. But on top of that, and here's the clincher. So when his sons would be tried, and they, because we were building the foundation of heaven, the very highest, the very most important roles of the whole patriarchal order, because we were building that, we had to make sure that everybody was in the place where they were the most devoted, right? Where they could handle the pressure. And what that meant was, if a man was not, or performed inadequately, they would lose their place high on this ladder. And when that happened, their children, their posterity, their wife and their kids would be separated from them, severed. And they would go to this guy's father.
Right, yeah.
RB.
And is that something that is that common doctrine across LDS, or is that something that RB introduced
It's just RB.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question because
Yeah.
as soon as you mentioned that he was the only one practicing polygamy, I thought that's either because that's a coincidence that, you know, I don't know, maybe there was some awful disease that came through and took out like, you know, the husbands that had loads of wives, or he is this RB guy is almost abusing his position of power to restrict and control the sexuality within the group.
Exactly.
So would it be common for him to take other men's wives?
Only if they failed to perform, and they would fail. They were
And
destined
because he's the one that's setting the bar.
Right, he sets the bar. Yeah. So that creates a lot of sadness, a lot of disappointment and misery, and it also creates a situation where when the men fail, they take responsibility for it. They are accountable for their own failure, and the judgment of being cut off from your family is just. So you just take it.
So you move there as a family unit, and you're contributing to this network, and you're putting in manual labor, or I'm guessing the women have jobs like childcare and education and maybe things like that.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. In practical terms, RB was an entrepreneur as well as a scientist. And before Zion, he was, you know, the CEO of his own, you know, industry of hydrogen research and computer manufacturing. Right, he actually built a PC at the same time that Apple Computer did.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
And yeah, so he was a pioneer in computing as well as alternative energy. So as a result, he knew how to build companies, and he had several, about half a dozen. When he had an idea, he would always try to build a company to market it and see if it would sustain itself. And this incidentally is also how Zion would receive funds, right? Because he would create a company, he would have his followers as his employees, as his free volunteers that did the work, and then he would, you know, the profits would be a lot greater because he didn't have to pay payroll.
Right.
So that's what we did. So we considered it our stewardship. The stewardship, you know, if you were a steward over something, you didn't own it, but you were responsible for it, and
right.
you could be like punished or rewarded by the outcome of that, right? So our stewardship was some job that we did during work hours, and yeah, so everybody had a stewardship, and often, yes, the mothers would be charged with tending the kids or doing laundry, or, you know, running the school, or sometimes running or working in like the call center, or being an accountant, or any of the other jobs as well. But usually, if there was something that had to do with raising the kids or doing housework, it was assigned to a woman. He was very traditional minded, chauvinistic that way.
Right. Yep. Just going back to a previous point, I couldn't imagine how devastating it would be to move to a place as a family unit and be there for a X amount of time, and then be told that your husband has failed to fulfill his role. So you're not allowed to be married to him anymore, but you can come and be married to me. And he's gonna watch you be remarried to me, who already has like X amount of wives. And you're still gonna have to be in the congregation together and see each other every day, but I'm going to sleep with you now, and he's going to carry on giving me free labor. And I don't know, it's just the whole thing just makes me feel extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah, it probably should. So I've been, I wouldn't call it married, but I've had marriages arranged for me, partnerships arranged for me 3 times while I was
By
there.
father.
By father.
Right, okay.
And yeah, each time had its own tragic ending. But I have 6 kids there.
Wow, oh my goodness. Okay, and they're still there now today?
They're still there. The my oldest son, who isn't the oldest child, but he's my oldest son, he left the group.
Okay.
All right. He's still living up there because his mom's there and he wants to help her out.
Absolutely, yeah.
And also he has a job there and friends and things, and that's fine. I'm really proud of him. I really am.
Are you in contact with him?
Yeah, not like every day, but now and then.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
we contact each other. He's definitely got his own life going on, and he's definitely not moving out here. I've invited him to stay with me, but he's like 24 now. He doesn't need me.
That sounds similar to you when you were that age, and you were like, I can go off and I can do what I want.
yeah, for sure, for real. Yeah, he's very independent and he's very smart, and I'm proud of him. But yeah, so I was in 3 arranged marriages, and they were only semi-arranged, and the first one is, she's a woman I brought with me. Like we were dating when I left. Okay. And so I told her the situation, that I had devoted my life to this cause, and she eventually, decided that she wanted to be part of that, and she came out, and we got married, and we had 2 kids, and we were fairly happy. And then I made just like a massive mistake.
No.
And RB had to, so this is how that went. So he had her in his room, and he sent one of his companions out to wake me up in the middle of the night. And this happened a lot. He would wake people up in the middle of the night.
Okay, so another aspect of coercion there, with sleep deprivation and whatnot. Okay.
Yeah. So he invited me up into his area, which is considered extremely sacred, his own private quarters, and they were also like fairly luxurious compared to everybody else's. We all lived in dorms, and he lived in this like deluxe apartment area. Yeah. So he calls me in. He's got my wife on his lap, and he is fondling her breast.
What? Excuse me, what?
Yes. And he's asking me, he says, she's really special. And
oh my goodness.
I want to know if you would willingly give her to me.
No.
Yes. And I'm extremely conflicted, because on one hand, I love her with all my heart. And it was very uncomfortable for me to see her like that.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. How must she be feeling in that moment as well? Nobody asks the woman, like, what do you think? What do you want?
Yeah. Right, exactly. And I imagine she was extremely uncomfortable with it too. But if if it's your savior, your God telling you
Mm-hmm.
that this needs to happen, then you think, well, it's right then. In spite of all of my problems, all of my disagreements with this is what's right. And so
But
it should.
John, you hadn't done anything. You hadn't like
Well, I hadn't not done anything.
failed to
I
reach
failed.
your goals or your.
Well, no, I had. I mean, I'd made a bunch of mistakes according to him, and they were. That's a whole nother story. I don't know how much time you have, and I'm just.
I have the time. I definitely have the time.
Okay. Because this is 17 years worth of very weird experiences. I could write not a book. I could write a series of books about this, and I might someday. I don't know. So this is how this happened. I'm 18 years old. At least it started there, and I am friends with another woman there who happens to be his wife. And we're not doing anything. We're not, my wife knew about her. We weren't having illicit affairs or anything like that. We were friends.
Okay.
And I don't know what was going on, but one night, father sends her to my room, of course, in the middle of the night, pulls me out, and then pulls down her blouse and says, sometimes mothers have intimate experiences with their sons when it's God's will. And I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do. But the key point is I didn't run. There's a story about who was it? Like Jacob, or maybe it was Joseph, the oldest son of Israel, that he was like seduced by the Pharaoh's daughters, and he ran. They had him in the bathhouse, and he ran because he was devoted, right? He was dedicated. But because she said that sometimes God arranges this, I was like, okay, so is this God's will that, I don't know what's happening. I was extremely confused, but because I didn't run, he felt like I was unfaithful to him, even though she said that she hinted that this was God's will.
But he sent her there
He sent her there to test.
Oh my goodness, this man is like the epitome of manipulation. He's like
You have no idea.
setting up scenarios to then years down the line have your wife sitting on his lap and justify it through years of careful manipulation.
I guess it wasn't it didn't happen the first year. It was maybe 4 years in, maybe 5, when this happened, because my kids were already they were already between 4 and 5 at the time. But yeah, we were separated very soon after that.
And when you say that this was his wife, was this his only wife at the time when you were 18, or did he have a number of wives at that time?
He had a number, yeah. He had a number. He may have had. Oh my
goodness, this guy sounds like
8 at the time.
He sounds awful.
Yeah.
So he takes your first wife. So if you went to the commune with her, I reckon he must have immediately met her and had his eye on her from the start. I can't imagine how. I don't know how it could be any different. And if he's just done this with you, he must have done it to others as well. I don't know. Probably. It's like years of careful engineering to get himself into these positions, it's very
Well,
uncomfortable, isn't it?
the organization was only 5 years old when I came, maybe 6. And I guess it was maybe almost 10 years at the time. There weren't a lot of people there. So he was definitely working on his approach.
Mm.
I had no idea. But and at that moment, I lost my kids
Oh my goodness.
and my 2 kids and her. And there were, times where he would have, experiences to remind me of that mistake. He would have like um, lessons. He had lots of lessons for people that were based on like whatever they happened to be working on at the time, and whether or not they let him down and how much they let him down would determine how intense that lesson would be. Quite often it was like being slapped around while being yelled at in front of everybody.
Oh
Um,
my goodness.
but he had lessons with me about that time when I let him down like that. Um, the first one, he like cast me out. He had bought some land in um, in another part of Blue Springs, which was nearby, that had a dilapidated house and farm, and he wanted me to help him. I couldn't stay in Zion. I wasn't worthy, but he wanted me to like help him by renovating that house by tearing out the roof and fixing up the walls and everything.
And is this
And
around about the time that your wife has?
yeah, it was shortly after that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So potentially there's the uh, maybe she's not fully committing to him because you're still around. I like what
Yeah.
like talk about kicking a dog when it's down. Like
Yeah.
he's not only has he just done this, but now he's going to force
Right.
you
Yeah. He
out
he
of the
had
area.
right, exactly, so that she would be more, I don't know, submissive. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't know.
Or
Or
my
yeah, or
influence wouldn't be
or your
around.
yeah,
Yeah.
or your kids don't get to see your face
Right.
around it. Oh my
Right.
goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was out doing that for a couple months outside of the group, and it wasn't until I proved my devotion through some weird experience that he arranged, that he allowed me back in. And he devises these very twisted tests of devotion. Um, Sometimes it was, enduring some amount of pain. Sometimes it was some sexual experience with one of his companions. And
Like just to see how far you
always,
would go
yeah,
for
just to,
him.
well, to see what you would do for him, right?
Right.
And devotion was the big thing, right? That was what determined where you were going to be during, when heaven was rebuilt,
Mm-hmm.
what level you were going to be at, and whether or not you would be cast off.
Mm-hmm.
So he would arrange these very weird experiences, and you would always be like really on your toes to make sure you weren't doing something that you wanted to do, but doing something that you knew he wanted you to do to test your devotion. It
Mm-hmm.
was really, yeah, it was a minefield.
Yeah, it sounds
Everything
absolutely
was a
exhausting.
minefield.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Uh, so yeah, eventually I was able to leave that, and at least be part of Zion again. But my family was gone. I got put in a dormitory with some of the younger guys who weren't married, and was like that for a few years.
Oh, that's so devastating. Oh my goodness.
And
At that
yeah,
point as well, because you've been cast out and then like air quotes like allowed to come back, do you
right.
feel grateful to him at that point that you're able to come back into his fold? Like, so it's
Well,
almost like he's
yeah,
doing
right,
you a
yeah,
favor, like
right.
he hasn't torn your life apart, he's
Exactly. You're
actually.
you're expected to be grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you weren't, then that sulkiness would get you punished again.
Mm-hmm.
even, I mean, I was heartbroken, and I was heartbroken for years.
Oh,
I
this
mean,
is
seeing my
horrible.
family around every day and not being able to be a husband or father, that was devastating, but I
Did
couldn't
you
show it.
did you ever get the opportunity to speak to your first wife about any of the things that happened?
Um, Opportunity, I guess the opportunity was there, but to say something, um,
I
when
just,
she could
yeah,
report me to him, and she
mm,
might report me to him because she was his
yeah.
companion, and his companions always sided with him. So I could have said something, but I knew it
Yeah.
wasn't wise.
And we have absolutely no idea what's going on behind, I would say behind like closed doors, but like I don't know, in other parts of this
Mm,
this big cave network, nobody knows the extent he's going to kind of enforce the thought reform on these women that he is bringing into his
right,
inner circle as well. So, you
right,
know, he's used all of these tactics on you. There's no way to tell what he's doing to these women
right,
that he's
exactly.
taken out of these other
Yeah,
relationships. And
right.
it could be so severe, the coercion that he's using, that you're right in saying that immediately she
Mm,
could have just gone to him and said like, look, I've had a conversation with Don and he's said
right.
this to me. But at the same time, I was just curious to know whether you ever managed to gauge her thoughts and feelings on what actually happened,
Um,
and how it affected her.
so years later, like a few years before I left, um, she had failed to meet his expectations too. And this by this time, like, I was as low as you could be in his ranking, right? Um, and so he kind of made us partners, but not companions. He made us like concubines is what he called it, and that's where you had like heaven endorsed that you could be together, but you shouldn't like have strong feelings for each other. Really, you should
Right.
just like
Okay.
be partners. And so just while that was happening, I became aware that she was different. She was broken.
Oh my
Like,
goodness.
she was dead behind the eyes. She couldn't.
Yeah, withdrawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it it was hard to see. It was hard to witness. Um, but yeah, he had done something. He'd done something to break her, to
And
break
I
her will.
wonder why that is. Do you think it's because she's aged, or because there are other people that he is spending time with at that point, that he would kind of banish her in almost the same way he did to you
Yeah.
years before?
It was she'd been punished quite a bit, like more than his other companions. She had
Okay.
been like punished, and I didn't have a good view of it, but I saw a few times where just like, let's see. So here's an example. Um, in his apartment, he would be working on something. He was always working on something with one of his companies, and he asked her to get him some coffee. There was a batch of coffee already there from earlier in the day. She warmed it up. She brought it to him. One of the other wives said she just warmed that up. She didn't even make a new batch. And he flipped his lid
No.
and just like yelled at her and
Oh my
demeaned her
goodness.
because she had the audacity to give the Lord a rewarmed cup of coffee. That is how petty he is.
That's so sad. That's so sad for the people experiencing this. Oh.
And I don't know what kind of like banishment or
Mm.
lesson she received after that, but witnessing that was just like yeah, wow. And then another time, he was out somewhere else, but she let him down, and he called me to smack her.
No, oh no, 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 no.
I'd never hit a woman before in my life, and I haven't since. But out of devotion, that was what I was expected to do, and then deliver a message from him, telling
Oh
her how
gosh.
disappointed that he was. And I've received like smacks from his companions that he told them to deliver, and resulting messages, but I'd never had to do it before, not to a woman.
That is like coercion on so many different levels, because not only is he enforcing something on you, but he's
Mm,
enforcing something on her, and he's also playing a big game to see
right.
who's devoted enough to him to carry out these horrible things.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness, this man sounds awful.
He is. And I have to say that was the beginning of the end for me when I did that. I'd never done that before. It was kind of against my own moral code,
Mm-hmm.
and doing that just kind of like something snapped in me. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't the last thing by any means, but it was definitely a major thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So how did you come to meet your second wife?
okay, that one was she had already been there. She had just barely turned 18, and I had huh, another tangent. So I my heels had been broken. I was crippled, and that
Physically, like
whole
physically?
nother yeah.
Oh
I was
my
in a
gosh.
wheelchair, but that's another story. If we want to go into that, I can.
It,
Um,
tell me this is like an accident that happened while you were working, and this is not something that was done to you
it
purposefully.
wasn't. It was done as a result of my worldview. So, okay, real quick. I was working on a project. Something in that project was failing, and I couldn't figure it out. I felt like I needed to prove my faith so that that curse would be removed. I felt like it had to be a major like expression of faith. So I went on top of the entryway to the ramp going down into the underground, which was 35, maybe 40 feet off the ground. And and in faith and yelling, Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna to God and the Lamb, I ran, I jumped, and I landed really hard. I broke both
Oh my
heels.
gosh. Oh.
And I did that because that's what I thought I was expected to do. Um, and yeah, that was awful. I still
Oh my
have like some
gosh.
terrible scars from that.
Is that
Uh,
something that others would do? Is that like a common thing that others in the group would express themselves in similar ways?
so if you did something to draw attention, unwanted attention from outside, then you should not do it. That was one of those things. Um, and I don't know if there was another punishment that would have been better for myself. I don't know. I but yeah, I mean there was another instance where a child was trying to show his devotion and jumped out of a treehouse kind of thing. But not it wasn't high enough to do like to break bones or anything. Um, but it wasn't like unheard of.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Um, so yeah, so I had to go to the hospital, had to get my heels reconstructed, went around in a wheelchair for a really long time, and I continued to do manual labor while I was crippled.
Oh
But
my
anyway,
goodness.
so while I was like that, this girl who was the daughter of one of his wives. She, I guess she felt sorry for me or something like that. But anyway, she told him that she had feelings for me, and he felt like that was, later on, he felt like when I was ready to be joined with somebody again, that he kind of hinted that she was the one that I should be with, and expected me to have some kind of revelation to show that, God was telling me the same thing. But he kind of hinted at it, and that's the way things worked sometimes. When you were, slow on the uptake of receiving the Spirit, then it was hinted to you until you got it.
Right.
Anyway, so I we had a kind of a joining ceremony. It wasn't like major. Basically, he's God, so that he doesn't have to have ceremonies. He just has to say, yeah, you two should be together, and now go be together.
Right.
And yeah, so then we were married, and it lasted all of like 6 months. I got her pregnant, and then I failed, and we were separated again. But during the time we were together, she confided in me that she had been groomed by him to be a queen, to be one of his companions.
Oh my goodness.
When she was like younger, like 16.
How is this man like not in a cell next to Warren Jeffs?
I think he's got some influence with the local authorities.
It sounds that way.
Yeah. We've had a couple of times where police or somebody would come down, would question us about one thing or another, and because we knew they were coming, we were told exactly what to say. We were given a common message, which was basically to deny that there was anything happening, that had any reason to concern anyone, and that there were a lot of people that were angry, that were making stuff up. So everybody there is kind of given that story, that narrative.
Yeah, and then obviously if there's no cause for concern, the police are just going to go away and not come back until they get like another anonymous phone call from maybe someone on the inside who's like, I don't want to give my name away, but I also want somebody to come and look at all these crazy things all these wild things that are happening.
Right. So there was this. Oh, go ahead.
Your second wife is kind of taken from you again, and then eventually marries father. So I wonder how she felt about that, and how her mother felt about that. Then is the mother still married to him? So the mother and the daughter are married to the same man.
Yeah.
And they're all having sexual intercourse with him, I
imagine. I mean, goodness. Yeah. I don't think that he has.
Then it just starts to feel like it's getting quite incestuous in that way when he's got mothers and daughters, and he could potentially be getting them all pregnant.
Right. The older women, he doesn't like. There are a couple that he doesn't that don't ever end up pregnant by him, and their mom was one of them. And she was the wife of one of the earlier people that came to Zion, who was cast off, who was cast out, and his family had to stay behind.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So because their original, the original father was cast off, of course, all of the kids got sealed to his father, which is,
yeah. And I wonder if he ever found out that his daughter was being groomed that whole time.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh my goodness, I'm like 3 weeks away from giving birth to like a girl, and I can't even. This is just filling me with absolute terror. I watched a documentary the other day on. It's called The 411. It was about kids going missing in national parks across America, like this weird phenomenon where people just vanish and there's no
Wow.
trace of them ever again. And one of them was like a 3-year-old little boy that just wandered off, and then they never found him. There was no trace of him. And I find that I used to really enjoy watching documentaries of like unsolved mysteries and stuff, but now that I've got children, it's
Yeah.
like watching those documentaries just fills me with terror.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
for
cannot
sure.
imagine how you must feel as a parent knowing that you've got children that still live in this place. And I
I
can,
got,
and then obviously
yeah,
everybody
it's hard.
understands why you don't want to be too specific with the information you're given, because you have people that you need to protect.
Well, there's two levels to that. One is absolutely that. When I left, so if anyone wrongs RB, he has his side of the story, which is usually spun in a way that makes him the victim, and whoever did the thing, the villain, not someone who made a mistake. They're evil and rebellious and the villain. And so when I left, he had his own version of the story. I learned from somebody else who had left that was wildly different from the truth, wildly different. And that's typical. So yeah, on one hand, if I do something that angers him, having left, he's going to vilify me to my kids.
Yeah.
But on another completely other level, he has threatened me with a gun.
Oh my goodness.
Before I left, before I was showing any signs of ever leaving, I'd never thought ever in my lifetime I would leave. He pulled me into a room and sat me down and put a gun on the table and said, if you ever do anything to hurt my family, and then just kind of gestured toward the gun.
Then you've got to think about the well-being of your children that are left there with him as well. Like, if he's willing to pull a gun on you, there's absolutely no telling what this man will do.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my goodness. He's starting to sound a little bit like the leader of the Anthill Kids, who was just the worst, one of the worst people I've ever researched and looked into oh my goodness, he was absolutely evil and heinous, like to the core. But he would play mind games with his followers in the same way that this guy is playing mind games with you. Getting his devotees to carry out the punishments on his behalf. And it's all sounding very similar. I mean, I don't know if people have died in this place, but there were a number of people that died under Rock Terrio's leadership with the Anthill Kids.
I can only mention like one person that semi-suspicious, I guess, the circumstances. And that was because I saw him shortly before he died. And that it was in a circumstance where RB, where he had done something that displeased RB, and RB just like knocked him on the side of the head and knocked his glasses off, knocked him to the floor. He got up, apologized profusely, and then hours later, after going to, he left to go to the hardware store to get some supplies for a project, came back shortly after, stumbled into the room I was in with some other people, saying something is terribly wrong, and just like flopped into a chair and died. Like,
Oh
he
my
didn't
gosh.
die right then. He just lost consciousness, and we got him into a van, took him to the hospital, and died right after he got in
Oh
after
my
he got in the
goodness.
emergency room. He had had an aneurysm of the brain, a burst blood vessel, and he died right after that. Um, so well, no, it wasn't murder. And I don't think there was any intent for him to die, but I don't think RB was too broken up that it happened. In fact, when one of the guys reported to RB, he joked, "Well, I guess it was his time to go."
Oh my gosh, this guy. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like a recipe for severe turns of mental health as well, in regards to the amount of stress and coercion that he is placing on people, and the things that he is carrying out just with your story alone, and we're talking 70 to 100 people just when you arrive there. Who knows how many people came and went during your time there. 17 years is a really long time. And then how people could not be seeking the medical attention that they need to deal with some of the stress on their health and well-being and their mental health as well. That there's I mean, there could be a number of people who suffered with severe depression from being a member of this group.
Yeah, there was a one girl who was one of his companions that went out out in the field up on top, just kind of left feeling completely worthless and intent on freezing to death up there.
Oh gosh.
Somebody else found her and brought her in, but she just went out in sub-freezing temperature and just wanted to die.
Which is also something that happened in the Savage Messiah book that I read about the Anthill Kids and Rock Terrio, how members would just walk off into the snow and leave babies out in the snow as well, because they were so badly mistreated that was a better option for them than to stay where they were, which is what sounds like this woman was experiencing. She would rather just fall asleep in the freezing cold. And then on top of that, there's the fear that when she's being brought back in, what wrath is she going to face then for defying orders by going out and putting herself in that position? It's just a roundabout of awful circumstances, and this guy just sounds evil. And then how can you justify this as religious? Religion is supposed to be about peace and love and caring for each other, taking care of each other, and this is not that at all. This is not.
He had scriptures for everything, right? And that part of the reason we were there was to become perfect in our devotion to him, which is how that's understood. And what that entailed is being like tried like pure silver, like the scriptures would say, and having the dross removed from you, which basically means you are put in a fire and melted, and then the non-pureness gets scraped off the top, and then you get pounded into shape. So all the tribulation and stuff was considered the refiner's fire, which was meant to purify and perfect us, and we should be grateful.
I don't see how anybody could become pure under the leadership of this awful person. But it's easy for me here to say that when I have not experienced any of the thought reform and coercion that every single one of you had experienced at such an extensive level, which is always so important to remember when we're having these discussions. That I can sit here comfortably from my living room and say these things, but it's different hearing about an experience than obviously living the experience. So how did you come to meet your third wife?
She was somebody I met on the internet. I had been encouraged to do some proselyting on public what is it called, on
Like
social
online
networking.
dating,
On
yeah,
social
yeah.
networking, yeah. Like Facebook was new, MySpace was still pretty strong. So I went out and found people online on Facebook, and there was a girl that I met online, and I talked her into coming out and visiting because I couldn't go out there. um, and she came. She was an independent enough person that she came out, and we converted her, and and then we got joined, and we had 3 kids, and that one lasted probably the longest, about 5, maybe 6 years, and yeah, my youngest kids are with her, and some of them are still teenagers. Only barely though, because I've been out for 17. Well, I've been out for like 12 years maybe. So they're
Mm-hmm.
maybe 16 or 17. Um, and Yeah, same thing. Just like um, do the best I can until he has me till he expects something from me that I can't, or that I can't do, and then he separated us. And when he did separate us, we none of my partners were. I have no hard or ill feelings for any of them. There, when you have ex spouses, you're supposed to feel like some kind of animosity. We had none. We were always friends. If I saw them again, we would still be
Mm-hmm.
friends.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when we were separated, I felt like if I could convince her that I had no malice or any hard feelings, that we could endure the separation. And so I wrote her an email, and when RB heard about the email I sent, he was livid, and he had me wait up really late for him to have a lesson with me. And he at about 2 a.m, he called me out, dragged me out into the dog kennel out in the mine,
Oh my gosh.
had me pull down my pants and got his paddle and paddled me in the
Oh
dog
gosh.
kennel where I couldn't leave if I wanted to. Up until then, if he had some paddling to do, I took it out in the open where I could have left if I wanted to, but I didn't because I was devoted. But in this case, where I couldn't leave if I wanted to, I just felt like a dog. I was being
Oh.
whipped like a badly treated dog. And um, that was too much. That was one of the other moments of breaking down my wall, my willingness to stay.
Oh my goodness, Don, that sounds absolutely awful.
And it was because I tried to preserve our relationship. That was why. That was what I
Mm.
was punished for.
And the fact that you were encouraged to go out and find people to bring,
Mm.
is there like a strict vetting process before she's allowed to be fully accepted into the group?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it usually entailed, once I had found somebody, just keeping in close contact with RB, sending him emails of our correspondence, letting him know what the current temperature is of this person and their interest, and receiving step-by-step instructions from him what to tell them, and how to lead them in. And if I, like, there was one time, like, she asked if RB had if he had multiple wives, and I said yes, he did. And but I couched it in as sensitive a way as I could. And when I told him, he blew up again, predictably. And he went on about how his relationships were called celestial marriage, and that it was sacred, and that it wasn't polygamy. I said they were, plural wives, or that he practiced polygamy. And because I used that word, because I used polygamy, because it's got a negative connotation, he flipped and he beat me, and he was beating somebody else at the time, and they were bent over, and he slammed my face into their back and broke my nose.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
Um, just like, how dare you use the word polygamy? It's plural marriage, you evil person.
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, you're the bad person in that situation. I don't see how that adds up at all. I can't. This man is just. Oh, how can he consider himself saintly or chosen
Well,
or a
because
prophet?
because he has righteous anger, right? If you lose your temper, you're probably possessed by some demon. But if you're led by the Spirit to be angry, then you are, righteously angry, and then your punishment is coming directly from God, and he's just a messenger.
I don't see how any level of anger justifies half of the things that you've mentioned that this guy has done. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're chatting for a couple of hours, so I can't even imagine the level and the depth that this goes to. And I'm guessing from the things that we've discussed that they're still happening today. You've mentioned having family members that still live there.
Yeah, maybe. So one thing that I'm not sure of, but I'm pretty sure that I got it harder than most people. I know everybody else got some.
I wonder why.
I couldn't feel the Spirit. Like, I just wasn't on the same wavelength as him. And because of that, and because obviously I've got some fatal weakness that I have to overcome, but I'm not overcoming because I'm not devoted enough, then I'm willfully disobedient, I guess, and rebellious even. And he's just tried so much to try to change me, but I just won't change. What it amounts to is he has something he wants, and we're expected to read his mind to determine that. And if we don't, we're not following the Spirit. And if we're not following the Spirit, then there must be some sin involved, some like impure thoughts or whatever. And when he asks what evil thing we've done, if we can't think of anything, then we make something up. The nearest thing that we can figure could possibly cause us to not be able to perform, or to feel guilty about what we've done. And sometimes just having him walk into the room, or knowing that he is there, as opposed to out at one of the other campuses. I should say the other campus, but there are other places he could be. Whenever he was there, I I would be really nervous. I would be like completely on edge.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
when he would come around and he would see any fear in my eyes, he would claim that I was possessed and start smacking me because I was afraid. He would like slap the hell out of me, and that would be the literal way it would be. And he would try to knock Lucifer out of me, like knock some demon. And after I'd been punished, I guess I wasn't afraid of it anymore because, well, it's already been done. And usually things calm down after that. So yeah, so that was another thing. He would
He
punish you for
could.
being afraid of punishment.
He sounds like he just absolutely could not stand the fact that you never 100% fully submitted to him.
Hmm.
I mean, why else would he keep doing these things to you and pushing you this far? And why would you get it worse than everybody else?
I think at one point he just wanted me to give up. He had his own code of conduct that he claimed. He had principles that he would teach everybody, and one of them was that God won't give up until you give up. And because of that, because I was tenacious, he would just push me to give up rather than give up. So I think toward the end, a lot of it was he was just like trying to get rid of me. He had, one of the reasons I know this is because like when there were group pictures toward the end, he would not let me be part of them.
Oh gosh.
Or if there was like when he had somebody starting to do my job in my stewardship, and he wanted me to train them so that if I couldn't do them for some reason, that job wouldn't suffer. So I was training my replacement a couple years before I left. So I take those things as a hint that he didn't really want me there toward the end.
He must feel very confident that you're not going to go to the authorities and speak to them about the things that go on there.
Well, there was one time when somebody came, and we were pretty sure that he was a federal agent.
Right.
He came and pretended to join the cult, to join the group. We didn't consider ourselves cults. We're not a cult. Everybody else might be a counterfeit of what God is doing. They're cults,
not us, because we're the chosen.
That's right. We're the real McCoy. But yeah, there was an agent that came from outside and pretended to be converted, and he witnessed some occasions where some of us were punished and whipped and smacked around, and he came to me at one point and asked me if I was okay, if I was in danger. And I, because RB had already like clued in that he was some agent or something, gave us, told us that he probably was, and that we should be careful what we say to him. And so I played along. I was just like, he said, "Are you in any danger?" I'm like, I turned it on him. I turned it on the agent and told him, "Why do you feel like were you beaten as a child?" I made him feel like he was being overly sensitive, and that this was okay. And he left without doing anything. But yeah, I was in danger, but I couldn't say so, and I felt like I would be unfaithful to do so.
Have you ever thought about going to speak on the record with authorities at any point since leaving?
Uh, I've thought about it. I wonder if it would do any good because there
Mm-hmm.
have been two other people who have left and attempted to get the authorities to do anything, and nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm of the opinion that if I tried, it would also fail. But not only would it fail, it would incur his wrath, and I don't know what he would do because he's kind of unhinged.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You've mentioned two notable things that happened that caused you to kind of edge towards leaving the group. What was the final thing that happened for you to say like I'm done and
Yeah.
I'm leaving?
Um, well, there were a couple other things, but the final thing was that I was in charge of doing AV work, doing technical work during his broadcast. So he would do when Zion got bigger and spanned two different locations. And I have to say that there was a class system in place where his family and the people who were closest to him, the most devoted, lived in this place they called Rivendell, which is a campus on Adirondack, which I mentioned was the place where the 144,000 were.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
bought some property up there. Anyway, he moved his family up there and a couple of most devoted other people, and they were the faithful ones. And then those of us who were running the businesses at the underground, we were, second class citizens. Anyway, so he would do broadcasts of his sermons between the two locations,
Right.
and I was in charge of running the equipment and getting the feed going. And I did a lot of IT work for the group as well. I was the head of IT for quite a while. But I was in charge of these broadcasts so that if anything happened, if the internet wasn't perfect, then then there was somebody to blame, which is me, and he could take it out on me. And since these were fairly early days in terms of streaming video, it happened pretty often. Anyway, often enough to the point where he was really fed up with it. So there was this one time where I was in charge of the feed again, and there was another thing that needed to go out, and content update for his educational program that had to go out the same night. And I wanted to talk to him to get his feedback on what's the most important, because one of them has to stop or else they'll both be compromised. And he was busy chewing out somebody else at the time, and I was afraid because even though he says that he's just and all that, in reality, if he's angry, you don't bug him because you will get punished for just existing. he wouldn't. I mean, he would single you out just because it bothered him that you talked to him when he was angry. Okay, so I didn't say anything, and I thought, well, I'll just make it the best I can, and have both things going at the same time. Well, the feed was terrible. The people up in Rivendell called back afterwards and said we could hardly hear anything because it was always rebuffering. And so he got really, really angry, and he called me into his apartment and yelling at me, and grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and pulled me up to him and said, "What is the cause of this great evil?" And I had to make something up. I had lustful thoughts, and he just sneers at me and says, "If you do anything like this again, if you ever do this again, your punishment in heaven will be worse than you can possibly imagine." And I'm like, well, this is going to happen again because the internet isn't perfect. And so what am I going to do to prevent it? Well, the only thing I can do, I'm going to have to leave. And so I told him it won't. And he said, this sin is worse than I can tolerate. You're going to have to go. You're going to have to leave. And when he meant leave, he often cast us out, like banish us to a hotel nearby where we would have to like spend a couple of days until we cried enough tears or repented of whatever we'd done that we could be allowed back in. And then when we were back in, we would be on some kind of like trial basis where we would be treated like rubbish until he felt like we were devoted enough to be given regular privileges and things.
Mm-hmm.
So this was intended to be one of those. He was going to cast me out, stay at a hotel, same deal. And I was of a different opinion. I felt like, I believed in the work, but I felt like I was a curse to it. So my leaving was the best I could do. I didn't want to have an eternal punishment worse than I could possibly imagine, because I absolutely believed that would happen. But I also didn't want to curse the work anymore. I felt like I was holding it back. So I decided I'm leaving now. And I couldn't bring my family with me. I couldn't even bring anything. I couldn't bring any money. I couldn't bring like more than like a couple of changes of clothes, or else I would be stealing from Zion. I'd be stealing from God. So I'm like, well, if I'm leaving for good, I shouldn't bring anything. So I didn't bother packing. What I did instead is I said goodbye to some of my kids. I like didn't say goodbye to them, just like talk to them and let them know that I love them. And when he found out, I was like talking to my daughter at the time. And when he found out, he got really angry and came out and like dragged me to my dorm and said, I told you to pack. You're leaving. I'm serious. And I'm like, okay. And I grab he's like in my room yelling at me. I grab armload of clothes out of the drawer. I throw it on the bed. I grab the blanket. I hoist it over my shoulder like some kind of hobo bag. And I start going out of the room, and he's following me. He's kicking me the entire time, all the way out the garage, and yelling. And he said, now run, when we got out to the garage. And so I'm like, okay. So I run. I make it to, and there's somebody else that's getting the same experiences as me. We're both cast out at the same time. It was my first wife, whom we were in a temporary relationship. And I didn't know what she was going through, only that she had somehow pissed him off the same amount. And it was, he seemed to do things in batches like that, where if somebody had to have some kind of harsh experience, then who else is having a hard time? We should probably give them both the same experience at the same time, just to make it more efficient or whatever. So we were both cast out, and we were both told to run to the garage, to run out to the gate and leave. And he chased us out, and with his truck, he met us at the gate by the road with his truck. Would have run us over if we didn't get out of the way. And just like turned it in front of us to kind of block our way. And then started getting out of his truck and like kind of stomping and yelling and going, I hope you're ready for me. I hope you're ready. Like he's going to do some terrible thing, like he's going to beat me up or something.
Oh my goodness. He just doesn't stop, does he? He doesn't turn off.
No. And the funny thing is, like a month or two before that, he said that he's going to try to be, less not confrontational, but less physical and things. Cause he was worried, I think, about people reporting that he's
absolutely, and so he should be.
Anyway, so he'd been actually fairly nice for the past little bit, and during that time I'm like, well, it's good, because I don't think I can handle this anymore. And that's part of the reason why I just had to get out of there, because I decided I had had enough of
Yeah, I
being.
mean, at some point, he's going to push somebody too far, and they're going to retaliate against him in a big way.
Right. And there were people there that were bigger than him. And one of the things I noted is that he didn't physically punish them as much, which, like, okay, you're God and you're afraid to deal the same punishment to this
Yeah.
big guy that you are to me, who is smaller than you. Yeah. So it was just like an item of doubt. Anyway, so I was faced with a snap decision. I had my belongings on my back. I just threw them to the ground and I just ran down the road. And when I felt like the air around me, and it connected with me that I was actually free. It was like one of the most exhilarating epiphanies of my entire life. I was free. And I hadn't realized I was bound before that, but suddenly I wasn't.
Wow.
And I felt this huge weight lift from my back, and I just picked up speed, and I just like sprinted as fast as I could. And I was excited, I was exhilarated, and I was determined never to go back. And later he said that when he saw me running, he told everybody else, I think, that he felt like that he felt that I was flying on demon's wings. Like, it's his way of vilifying me. And that he felt like he would never see me again. Well, I felt the same thing, that I would never see him again. And yeah, so I hid. I jumped into like a ditch by the side of the road that was dry, and I just kind of crouched down there and I waited for like an hour until I was sure he wasn't going to follow me. And then I just walked about 12 miles or so to like Kansas City. Well, no, I didn't go there. I didn't go there yet. I went to a hotel, and I waited there until morning. I like slept outside on a park bench. And when they opened up, I sent an email to my family asking if anyone was willing to spare, to let me borrow some money so I could get a bus ticket. And they were climbing all over each other to try to help me.
Oh, amazing.
They are amazing. I've got a great family. We're huge. We're a huge family, but they're a good bunch. And yeah, they invited me to have a place to stay. And even though I had nothing with me but the clothes on my back, they helped me get started again.
That is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, for real. I don't know what I would do without them.
It shows you how important it is to always make sure that you keep the door open for your family, because anybody that's in the situation that you were in, could come knocking or call in any day. Right. And extend that olive branch. And it's so, so important that they know that you're there to say, I know it's been difficult and I know that we've lost contact, but I'm willing to take this next step with you and support you into coming out and starting afresh. So it's so wonderful to hear that you had that support network on the outside waiting for you, even though you were involved for 17 years.
Oh, definitely. And I don't know, we could have grown apart in that time. I could have like caused them to feel abandoned, but they didn't see it that way. They kind of knew what I was up against, and that I was held not against my will, but against my better judgment. Yeah, I definitely was held, but my chains were built inside my mind. And I think a
But
lot of
they
people.
instantly shattered at that moment where you had that
That's
fight
right.
or flight moment and you just ran. And
Yes.
I
Yeah.
absolutely love hearing those moments where people just have that
Mm.
veil lifted and they just have that moment of clarity
Mm.
where they're like, oh my goodness,
Right.
no more, no more.
Yeah. Um, though, I mean, you would write that in a book, and that would be like the climax moment, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But in reality, it doesn't just go away like that. Like I
No.
believed that even though I was out of there, in my mind I wasn't. I still believed everything. I was only physically out because I felt like I was cursing the work, right? And I didn't want to, be a burden to it anymore. Even though I knew that I could never go back, but it took a about 5 more years to really leave
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
the belief behind, and the feelings, the visceral feelings of like anxiety and fear, they haven't gone away yet. I still have them, and I'm going to therapy for the PTSD.
Absolutely. That was going to
Still
be
there.
my next question, sort of, were there any steps that you
Mhm.
took to rebuilding your
Yeah.
life in terms of your mental health and your well-being?
Yeah. Thankfully, I work for a company that has a mental health program.
Oh,
Um,
fantastic.
unfortunately, and I think this is I don't know if it's not really a failing of the system. It's just I think it's being overlooked that insurance companies are not supporting specialists in psychology, exit counselors, like people who are trained by the books of Stephen Hassan and others
Mm-hmm.
who have experienced um, authoritarian groups and know how to deprogram you. So I didn't have anything like that. I couldn't possibly afford it. And I mean, I still don't have it, but I've done a lot of reading, and I'm doing my own kind of personal therapy right now with my own podcast. Well, it's not
Mm-hmm.
mine.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
um, a group of my in-laws and friends got together, and they they wanted to do a podcast that was also like starting their own cult, just kind of for fun. And I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, hearing them talk about it, and said, hey, I've got a little bit of cult experience. Mind if
Yep,
I help?
absolutely. Yep. And this is something that I have actually mentioned in a previous
Mm-hmm.
episode. So maybe some of the
Nice.
listeners are going to put two and two together now if they actually went and listened to the show and will be like, oh my goodness, yes, it's all coming together.
Right. Yeah. So the podcast. Oh, and thank you. I appreciate the
Oh no,
publicity.
it's
We're
yeah, it's I love the opportunity to share fellow content creators, especially when we're all kind of striving towards the same goals.
right. Yeah. For real. So the podcast is called "Mom, I Joined a Cult." Uh, it's just an excuse for me to hang out with some cool guys while doing my own PTSD self therapy. It really belongs to Gunnar and Nathan, and who are in the podcast, as well as Thor. And we pretend to be starting a cult. We call it the Nice Cult. And unlike other cults, which are, just objectively terrible, we wanted to. There are positive sides to some cults. The reason that people join cults is to fulfill certain holes they have in their lives, right? They might need a sense of belonging or a sense of purpose. So we wanted to build a cult that provided those things without the downsides of like mind control and all of the the problems that are mentioned in the bite model. So the nice cult, in the nice cult, we go through different cults every episode, and we talk about their good points and their bad points and what we want to incorporate into our cult. And we have a leader. He's an imaginary guy that we picked up on this site called This Person Does Not Exist. Have you seen it? If you go to thispersondoesnotexist.com, there's a machine learning algorithm that kind of patches together pieces of people's faces from all over the internet to make someone completely new that doesn't really exist.
Oh, I have seen them. And it's like, this person is not real. They're computer generated. Exactly. And they look so real.
Right?
Oh, it's creepy.
So we found this guy that is a little bit off-putting, but, looks kind of like a cult leader. And we called him Ronaldo DiCaprio. No relation to the other DiCaprio. And he's our leader, our elusive and imaginary leader. And because he doesn't exist, he can't make any mistakes. And we tell stories about his conquests in life, and we have people send us messages of sightings they've had where they've seen him and the great things that he did with them or for them and their inspiration, and we share those on our show. So so if you want to join a cult, join the nice cult.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our discussion today. I cannot believe the absolute roller coaster of a journey that you have just taken us through. I know it must be difficult to sit there and relive some of these experiences and talk through them, but I always believe that there are people listening who will be helped by these stories, who will be inspired and motivated by them to make positive changes in their lives and know that they are not alone in their situations, and that there are other people out there who have experienced coercion, who have experienced manipulation, right, who have been through these awful experiences and can rebuild their lives on the other side, just like you have managed to do. So I cannot tell you how thankful I am that you've sat here with me today and told me the most wild story. I think this is probably one of the wildest ones that we've heard on the show. But I'm just so grateful that you've come here and trusted me with this story and this information and taken us on this journey today. So thank you so much, Don.
Well, absolutely, Katie. And I appreciate that you were part of this movement, this mechanism of change and healing. And I'm encouraged to hear the stories of other cults and find out that, realize that what I'm experiencing, the anxiety, the residual fear and guilt, is not unique. That it's not the Holy Ghost telling me that I'm wrong, or that heaven's going to exact some kind of punishment. But it's a common thing. It's a common thing that cults make you feel, and it's a relief. And I appreciate your show.
It's been absolutely wonderful to talk with you today, Don. I really hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll catch up soon.
All right. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That is the end of this week's episode. To get in touch, please email me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, and this has been the Cult Vault.